Act 1, The Incident at Bellingshausen Station. The silence before the storm. Inside the station, the air was thick with tension. The days had grown long, blending into nights that seemed endless. The base was cut off from the outside world, surrounded by nothing but miles of ice and an unrelenting void of darkness. At the small dining table, Sergei Savitsky turned the page of his book, but his mind wasn't on the words. Across from him, Oleg Belogozov chuckled, shaking his head. "You don't need to read any further, Sergei," he smirked. "I can tell you how it ends." Savitsky's fingers tightened around the book, his knuckles turning white. It wasn't the first time Belogozov had done this. It had become a habit, a joke to pass the time in this isolated wasteland. But tonight, something was different. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast sharp shadows on the walls. The sound of the wind outside made the walls creak like a ship lost at sea. The isolation, the monotony, the psychological strain, all of it had been building up for months. And now, with one casual remark, something inside Savitsky snapped. The attack. Nobody saw him move. 1 second, Savitsky was sitting still. The next, his chair scraped against the floor as he lunged forward, the knife in his hand. Belogozov barely had time to react. The cold steel sliced through his jacket, piercing his side. He let out a sharp cry, knocking over his chair as he stumbled backward, blood staining his uniform. The few colleagues in the room froze, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. For months, they had all endured the same endless routine, the same faces, the same meals, the same tiny, claustrophobic walls. But violence. Here. One scientist rushed forward, grabbing Savitsky by the arms and pulling him back. Others pressed against Belogozov's wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The entire station, usually a place of order and quiet, descended into chaos. Emergency response. In the middle of nowhere. Antarctica isn't built for crime. There are no police. No immediate medical teams. No fast response units. The closest hospital? Thousands of miles away. The station commander sent an emergency call to Chilean authorities. A rescue flight would be arranged, but in Antarctica, nothing happens quickly. The storm raging outside meant no one was getting in or out anytime soon. For several hours, Belogozov lay on a makeshift operating table, his colleagues doing their best to keep him stable. Blood pooled on the stainless steel surface beneath him. The station's small medical room wasn't equipped for major trauma. They had only basic tools, limited supplies, and no surgeon. Every minute felt like an eternity. The waiting game. As Belogozov fought for his life, Savitsky sat motionless in a corner of the station, his face blank. He had surrendered without resistance, his mind seemingly as frozen as the landscape outside. But what now? Antarctica had no jail. No holding cells. No police force. The station staff were left with a question nobody had ever prepared for. What do you do with a man who just tried to kill someone, when there's nowhere to take him? The answer? Lock him in the only place they could think of. The Church of the Isolated Man. Bellingshausen Station had one unexpected feature: a tiny Russian Orthodox church, built for the religious personnel stationed there. And that's where they put him. For 10 days, Savitsky lived alone in the church, surrounded by religious icons and candlelight. No internet. No books. No contact with the other station members. Just silence. The same silence that had driven him to the edge. Did he regret what he had done? Did the isolation help him understand what he had become? Or did it only make him more lost in his own mind? Rescue and aftermath. After 10 days, the storm finally lifted. A Chilean medical team arrived to transport Belogozov to a hospital in Punta Arenas, Chile. He survived. And Savitsky? He was flown back to Russia, straight into the hands of the authorities. He faced charges of attempted murder, a crime that seemed almost absurd in such a remote, isolated place. But was it really about the books? Or was this something far more sinister? Antarctica pushes people to their limits. It isolates them, breaks them down, turns small annoyances into unbearable torments. For some, it's a place of scientific discovery. For others, it's a pressure cooker of the mind. And when that pressure builds too much, someone always snaps. Act 2, Crimes in the Frozen Void. The Chess Game That Turned Deadly, 1959. Chess is a game of patience, strategy, and sometimes, deadly consequences. At Vostok Station, one of the coldest and most remote places on Earth, two Russian scientists faced off in a chess match. A simple game, a way to pass the time in the endless winter. But then, one of them lost. And the winner? He couldn't resist mocking his opponent, taunting him over every mistake. Something snapped. The losing player, consumed by humiliation and rage, grabbed an axe. Some reports say the victim died instantly, others claim he survived, barely clinging to life. But one thing was certain. Chess was permanently banned in Russian Antarctic stations. Imagine that, a board game, outlawed not because of politics, but because it was simply too dangerous. The McMurdo Station Hammer Attack, 1996. Antarctica isn't just home to scientists, it houses engineers, doctors, and support staff, including kitchen workers who keep the teams fed through the long, brutal winters. But sometimes, the smallest conflicts explode into violence. At McMurdo Station, an argument between two cooks spiraled out of control. One of them, blinded by fury, grabbed a hammer, the clawed end, and attacked his co-worker. A third person tried to break up the fight and ended up injured, too. This time, the incident wasn't just brushed under the rug. For the first time in history, the FBI was sent to Antarctica to investigate a violent crime. A frozen wasteland, yet still, the long arm of the law reached into the ice. The poisoning of Rodney Marks, 2000. Not all crimes in Antarctica are committed with weapons. Some are far more insidious. Rodney Marks was a brilliant astrophysicist, stationed at the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station, one of the most isolated places on Earth. But on a cold May morning in 2000, he suddenly fell violently ill. Severe nausea. Excruciating stomach pain. Uncontrollable vomiting. 3 times, he sought help from the station doctor. The next morning, he was dead. There was no explanation. Because it was winter, his body had to be kept in a freezer for 6 months until it could be flown back to New Zealand for an autopsy. And when the results came in, the truth was shocking. Rodney Marks had been poisoned with methanol. But how? And more importantly, who did it? A colleague with a grudge? A deadly mistake? Or a perfectly executed crime? There were only 49 people at the station at the time. No suspects. No arrests. The case remains unsolved. How many secrets lie buried under the ice? 3 crimes. 3 victims. And who knows how many more remain hidden beneath the ice? Antarctica is a vast, lawless expanse. If someone commits murder here, who would ever find out? Act 3, the Argentine base that went up in flames. The fire in the ice. Antarctica is a land of extremes: extreme cold, extreme isolation, and sometimes, extreme desperation. At Almirante Brown Station, an Argentine research base, a single decision changed everything. In 1984, one man had reached his limit. A doctor, stationed there for months, received devastating news. He would have to stay for another winter. 6 more months. No flights. No way out. Just the same routine. The same faces. The same cold, unchanging world. The breaking point. Isolation does strange things to the mind. In Antarctica, there are no distractions, no escape, no break from the endless cycle of work and waiting. Something inside him snapped. His solution? Burn it all down. He knew exactly what he was doing. And he knew exactly what would happen next. A fire in Antarctica is a disaster. There are no fire stations, no emergency responders rushing in to help. If the base burned, they would have to evacuate. And evacuate they did. The evacuation. The emergency signal was sent. A rescue mission was immediately launched. The last ship of the season, the very one that was meant to leave without him, now had no choice but to return and take them all home. His plan had worked perfectly. They had no choice but to flee. And just like that, the doctor was on his way back to Argentina. Desperate times, desperate measures. Was it an act of madness? Or genius? Visuals: a man standing at the edge of the ice, staring at the distant horizon as the ship takes him away. There are few things more terrifying than being trapped in Antarctica. The cold. The darkness. The utter isolation. For most, it's enough to drive a person to their breaking point. For some, it's enough to make them burn everything to the ground. Act 4, why does this happen? The human mind under extreme conditions. Antarctica is more than just a place, it's a mental battlefield. It's not just the cold or the isolation, it's the slow, relentless erosion of sanity. People who come here are not ordinary. They are scientists, explorers, engineers, the best of the best. But even the strongest minds can break. And when they do, things can go terribly wrong. Isolation, trapped with no way out. Imagine this. The same 12 to 20 people around you. The same conversations. The same voices day in, day out. The same walls closing in on you. For 6 months, maybe longer, there is no way out. No new people. No fresh interactions. No break from the never-ending routine. The smallest annoyance can become unbearable. A coworker chewing too loudly. Someone leaving their boots in the wrong place. A simple joke repeated one too many times. Little things that would be ignored in normal life start to fester. Until one day, they explode. Monotony, every day is the same. There are no weekends in Antarctica. There is no time off. There is no escape from the endless loop of work and survival. Wake up. Eat the same food. See the same people. Do the same work. Sleep. Repeat. For months. For some, the mind becomes numb. For others, the pressure builds, simmering beneath the surface, until it finally erupts. Lack of escape, nowhere to go. When things go wrong in the real world, there's always a way out. Quit your job. Move to another city. Take a break. In Antarctica, there's nothing. No flights. No ships. No way to leave. For 6 months of the year, bases are completely cut off from the world. If tensions rise, if someone snaps, if a crime is committed, there is no immediate solution. You are stuck with them. The cold, a constant, merciless enemy. Cold isn't just uncomfortable. It's an enemy. Temperatures can drop to -89.2 degrees Celsius, -128.6 degrees Fahrenheit, the lowest recorded natural temperature on Earth. At this level, your body fights to survive every second of the day. Your fingers stiffen. Your skin burns from frostbite. The air is so cold it feels like breathing in knives. The human brain isn't built for this. And over time, it starts to malfunction. Darkness, the sun disappears for months. In some places in Antarctica, the sun disappears for months at a time. Months of pure darkness. No daylight. No sunrise. No natural cues to remind you that time is passing. Your body loses track of day and night. Sleep becomes impossible. Fatigue sets in. Reality begins to distort. This isn't just difficult, it's dangerous. It can lead to psychosis, a condition where people lose touch with reality. And once that happens, anything is possible. Scientists aren't just battling the cold, they're rebattling themselves. Antarctica is a place where nature doesn't just test your body, it tests your mind. Isolation. Monotony. No escape. The cold. The darkness. Each one is dangerous. But together, they can drive even the strongest person to their breaking point. And when that happens, people snap. Act 5, whose laws apply? Lawless landscape. Antarctica is unlike any other place on Earth. There are no police. No prisons. No courts. So, what really happens when someone commits a crime here? The Antarctic Treaty, who has authority? In 1959, several nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, agreeing that no one country owns Antarctica. Instead, the continent is dedicated to peaceful scientific research. But there's a legal loophole. According to the treaty, if someone commits a crime in Antarctica, they fall under the laws of their home country. Example: if a Russian scientist commits a crime, Russia handles the case. If an American researcher breaks the law, the US deals with it. Sounds simple, right? But in reality, it's much more complicated. When crime meets isolation, most Antarctic stations are completely inaccessible for months at a time. If a crime happens during winter when no flights, no ships, no escape is possible, what then? In Sergei Savitsky's case, after stabbing his co-worker at Bellingshausen station, he had nowhere to go. So what did they do? They locked him inside a tiny Orthodox church and waited. For 10 days, he lived in isolation, trapped in a place meant for prayer. And when the first available flight arrived, he was taken straight to Russia, where his fate would be decided by Russian courts. But what if there's no one to send the criminal home to? Can you commit the perfect crime in Antarctica? Think about it. A place with no police, no cameras, no immediate authority. A place where bodies could vanish into the ice, never to be found. Theoretically, someone could commit the perfect crime and no one would ever know. But does that mean people get away with it? Not exactly. The legal nightmare. If a crime is committed in Antarctica, there are several ways it can be handled. 1. Immediate station action. If the situation is dangerous, the station commander can isolate the suspect, restrain them, or even lock them away until help arrives. 2. Evacuation. If flights are available, the suspect is sent home for trial under their country's laws. 3. Multinational investigations. If the crime happens in a station operated by multiple nations, or if the suspect's nationality is unclear, multiple governments may get involved. This can turn into a bureaucratic nightmare. Examples of Antarctic legal chaos: the McMurdo Station hammer attack, 1996. FBI agents were flown to Antarctica to investigate one of the only known law enforcement missions to the continent. The suspect was detained and then deported back to the US. The poisoning of Rodney Marks, 2000. Rodney Marks died from methanol poisoning. The body was sent to New Zealand, since the base was in New Zealand's claimed territory. But since there was no solid evidence, no arrests were made. The Almirante Brown Station fire, 1984. An Argentine doctor burned down his own base to escape another winter. He was evacuated but faced no legal consequences. What's the worst crime you could commit here? In a place where there's no immediate law enforcement, what's the worst crime possible? Burning down a station? It's happened. Attacking a co-worker? Also happened. Or something much darker, murder, with no one left to investigate? What if someone disappeared into the ice? What if there was no body to find? What if the Antarctic cold erased all evidence before anyone could ask questions? Would anyone ever know the truth? Act 6, could you survive Antarctica? The ultimate test of human endurance. Antarctica isn't just a place. It's a challenge. A mental and physical battlefield. A place where only the strongest minds survive. But could you make it? Would you last through 6 months of darkness, freezing cold, and complete isolation? Or would you, like so many before you, finally snap? The cold, can your body handle -89.2 degrees Celsius? Antarctica is the coldest place on Earth. Temperatures can drop to -89.2 degrees Celsius -128.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is so dry, it sucks moisture from your skin, lips, and lungs. Exposed skin freezes in seconds. Breathing too fast? The air burns your throat. Your body fights to stay warm, but it's never enough. Frostbite is constant. Hypothermia is a real threat. The cold never stops. Could you handle that? The darkness, no sun for months. In some parts of Antarctica, the sun disappears completely for up to 6 months. Imagine waking up, and it's still night. Every single day. No sunrise. No sunset. No natural light to tell your brain that time is passing. Your body's internal clock starts breaking down. Your sleep schedule falls apart. You feel constantly exhausted. Some people hallucinate shadows moving in the darkness, voices whispering in the wind. Could you survive the endless night? The monotony, every day is the same. Antarctica isn't exciting. It's monotonous. Wake up. Eat the same food. See the same